Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about food shortages and famine here in the year 2022. We're going to talk about why it's happening, why it's going to get worse, and what you can do about it. Most importantly, we're going to talk about what Jesus said about famine, which is that it is a sign and an indication that he is soon to return. So let's get right into it. Why is this happening? Despite what we hear in the media, this isn't all about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Ukraine, yes, is one of the top exporters of agricultural products in the world. So obviously this invasion has disrupted their ability to plant and to harvest, their access to seeds and diesel and fertilizer, all sorts of issues. There's blockages in the ports and their ability to get that out. All of this is just exacerbating an already existing problem that a lot of people were talking about back in 2021. We discussed it in the newsletter back in January, again in March. So this is an ongoing problem. So let's look at why and dive right into this first article, which is from Fox News. So Fox did an interview with John Boyd Jr., who is president of the National Black Farmers Association, and it says he issued a dire warning of devastating consequences if the cost of fuel and fertilizer do not come down soon. You have the high cost of fuel, the high cost of fertilizer and lime, and all these upfront costs for America's farmers, and we haven't done anything in place to fix that, he said, adding he's still waiting to hear back from the White House on a meeting that was promised. Boyd predicted that if key leaders refused to intervene, Americans could soon see evidence of a commodity shortage at their local grocery stores as empty shelves become increasingly common. Now, again, he hits on the point here, which is that the cost of fertilizer has skyrocketed. Why is that? There's a number of reasons. One is the high cost of natural gas, which is a key input into fertilizer, has caused a lot of fertilizer production companies, especially in Europe where natural gas prices are markedly higher, to just shut down production because it's not profitable. So without that fertilizer, there's shortages around the world, and what is available has gone up significantly in price, in some cases tripled or quadrupled from what it was a year ago. So that's a key input for farmers, makes their costs go up. Prices for the food that they're selling into the marketplace hasn't gone up triple and quadruple, so they aren't able to recoup those costs. That makes it less profitable to farm. Then you throw in diesel supplies. We've had shortages of those, rising prices of those, all sorts of issues with the supply chain, with labor shortages. All of this is combined to make farming far more difficult in 2022. So along those lines, we'll go to this article, which is from Weber County in Utah. It says, Weber County family farm fights through herbicide shortages, drought, and rising costs. So herbicide shortages are part of this problem now as well. It says, a shortage of chemicals found in herbicides is putting even more rising costs on the backs of Utah farmers in an already difficult year. At the McFarland family farms in Weber County, they're dealing with so many rising costs along with the drought that it's all they can do just to get by this year. Less water means fewer crops, but that's just one of the problems farmers are facing right now. Not only is this a tough year, it's tough every year, he said. He's seeing shortages of many things right now, including herbicides. The different chemicals we had to use this spring didn't work as well, so we had a crop of sweet corn that was full of weeds. Along with that, higher cost of fertilizer means he had to buy less. So keep in mind here, when there's less fertilizer that's being used, there's less availability of herbicides. This is taking resources away from the crops, which means that your crop yields are going to be lower. So let's turn and look at this AgFacts article about Iowa field reports, because this isn't just an issue in Utah, where that family was. We read here, Iowa field reports corn rootworms, Japanese beetles, grasshoppers, and numerous diseases. This is from 2 days ago. It says, with hot weather and few rain chances in the forecast, concern turns toward soil moisture reserves and the ever-important pollination timing in corn. Iowa State University Extension field agronomist observed corn rootworm beetles, Japanese beetle feeding, grasshoppers, numerous diseases, and more off-target herbicide movement this week. So this has several reports. You can go in and read about them. I'm going to look at this first one, which is from Region 1. It says, most of the region I serve is in one of the drought categories, and the weather forecast for the next 10 days concerns me a lot. We will see how well our hybrids handle the heat stress during and after pollination. On Monday afternoon, there was a lot of leaf rolling in many fields, particularly in the D3 extreme drought area noted in most of the recent drought monitor. We are presently similar to the amount of water available we had this time last year, but the forecast is much warmer, which means daily demand will be higher than we observed last year. Corn, flattened by the derecho of a few weeks ago, have goosenecked back up, but likely will not tolerate the stress quite as well. So they had a big storm come through Iowa that flattened a lot of this corn, so that corn is under stress already. And now we have, this is why these food shortages, we're going to have even further problems than just the fertilizers, the herbicides, but in the Midwest and a lot of the growing regions in the middle of the United States, we're experiencing high temperatures. We've already had some drought for most of the year. Now we have much higher, warmer temperatures for the next week. And it's already been that way for a few days. What's impact is that going to have on crop yields? So that's one of the reasons that we're going to see the situation globally continue to get worse, unfortunately. So the same thing is happening in Italy. This article says Italy's farmers in race against time as drought threatens crops. Farmers in Italy's Lombardy region are desperately trying to save their crops, regional authorities have warned, as water supplies continue to wane across the drought-stricken country. In a press conference in Milan, the head of the Lombardy region told journalists that agricultural water reserves are expected to be fully depleted by the end of July at the latest. So there's severe drought going on in Europe. They also have high temperatures this week. So the whole northern hemisphere is experiencing very high temperatures and drought this season, this growing season, and that's going to have a huge impact, as we see in this Zero Hedge article, which says satellite imagery shows global crop declines except for Russia and China. Infrared satellite imagery designed to measure moisture levels and the health of farmland suggests that staple crops such as wheat are in poor condition and in sharp decline among major exporters, including the Ukraine, the US, and India. Two countries do have bumper crops so far, though, namely Russia and China. Now let's talk about that for a moment. So you would think that Russia and China having these bumper crops, well, that'll help alleviate the situation. Unfortunately, China, while it is one of the leading agricultural producers in the world, they also have 1.4 billion people. So they don't really export a lot of that. A lot of the food they export is really things that have been brought in, the agricultural commodities, and turned into other products and then exported back out to end up in grocery stores, things like that. They are a net importer of food, not a net exporter of food. So a bumper crop in China doesn't necessarily mean that the world is going to be better off. And in regard to Russia, we already know how they feel. They've made it very clear that if you're on friendly terms with Russia, then you can gain access to Russian commodities like oil, agricultural products, and everything else. If you're on unfriendly terms, then you're going to have to pay big if you want it at all. So, the US, India, Canada, some of these countries, that's where we would expect to have an uptick in maybe some exporting that offsets some of these problems we've been having, but we're not seeing that because the shortages of fertilizer and fuel and herbicides, all this stuff, it's a global problem. It's affecting every region at the same time, and that's an abnormal situation. As if it's not worse, we can always count on the government to make it worse. So that's what's happening in the Netherlands, where we read in this next Zero Hedge article, Dutch dairy farmer faces having to cull 95% of his cows. So what's going on here is the Netherlands has implemented these climate policies where they want to regulate the amount of nitrogen in the atmosphere, and they're really targeting farms. And it's going to cause a lot of farmers to have to go out of business, essentially. They aren't able to comply with these regulations and continue with their farms. And while the Netherlands seems like a tiny country, it's one of the top 10 exporters in the world. They're on par with France when it comes to agricultural products. So again, the food supply is really under stress right now as we go through the year. So what's coming next? Well, what we're going to see is food inflation. So massive food inflation in a lot of places. We're already seeing it happen, but it's just going to get worse as we go through the year. In this article, we read one of Mexico's most renowned economists is predicting Mexico will reach a 10% inflation rate by the end of the year, which would be disastrous and could lead to famine in some parts of the country. So what's going to happen is the food production is not going to be evenly distributed throughout the world. You're going to have the richer countries, a lot of the countries that are net growers and typically exporters of food in the past are going to start putting up export bans, because there's going to be a lot of pressure on politicians to keep that food on hand for their own populations. So they're going to stop exporting that food, and that means those countries that are relying on food and fuel imports are going to really be in a world of hurt. They're going to have to compete on the open market for whatever supply is there, and it's going to drive the prices very high. So you're going to see shortages and famine, and mostly the countries that import a lot of their food and that are the poorest countries. And then you're going to see really high food inflation for the poor in every country globally, because this is a global issue. It's a global marketplace. So we're already seeing indications of that here in the United States. This is an article from Texas and the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It says food banks are seeing longer lines because of inflation. The lines at local food banks and pantries are getting longer lately as inflation and rising costs of just about everything put a strain on people's wallets. In fact, in Tarrant Area Food Bank said since April the lines have been getting worse than they were at the height of the pandemic. When I talk to folks in cars, they are working. So these are people that are working, but their paycheck isn't going as far because the basic necessities like food are more expensive. Their data shows the cost of food has risen by 9%. Combined with higher gas prices, rent, and an increase in just about everything else, that's putting a big strain on family budgets. So this is going to put a huge strain on the poor and the working class all across the world. People who have the resources, as they realize how dire the situation is, they're going to start buying up extra supplies, building out deeper pantries for their families, which is going to mean less is available, and what is available at a much higher price to everybody else. So again, this is going to lead to famine here at the end of 2022 and well into 2023. Here we have this article from Voice of America. It says, World Food Program Chief David Beasley raised alarm Wednesday on Capitol Hill about the possibility of global food shortages next year if Russia does not lift its blockade of Ukrainian grain exports and send its own fertilizer to world markets. Now, we've already discussed this is a much bigger problem than just the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So even if that was resolved tomorrow, it will not fix this problem. This is a problem that has been ongoing for months, if not a couple of years already, with supply chain breakdowns, with fertilizer shortages, herbicide shortages, diesel prices, labor shortages, drought, a whole host of different converging events that have caused this problem. So he goes on. And that is going to be a crisis beyond anything we have seen in our lifetime, he warned. Beasley noted that in 2008, when global inflation and food prices last saw a severe spike, civil unrest, protests, and riots followed in nearly 50 nations. The situation today is much, much worse, and we are already beginning to see destabilization take place in many countries. Sri Lanka, we saw what happened in Mali, Chad, Burkina Faso. We're seeing protests and riots in Kenya, Pakistan, Peru, Indonesia, and I could go on. In addition to destabilization and the potential for mass migration, Beasley said the number of people severely food insecure were at 276 million before Russia's invasion. Now they're projected to be at 345 million. Within that number, he said, 50 million people in 45 countries are knocking on famine's door. So, as we said before, guys, unfortunately, there's not going to be enough food produced and distributed because a lot of this is a logistical supply problem in 2022 and 2023 to feed everyone. So there's going to be shortages, food inflation, and there's going to be famine in certain areas around the globe. So the question is, what can you do about this? Well, Jesus said we're going to have trials and tribulations in this life. There's no guarantee about that. While we, as Christians, He has promised to lead us out of the great tribulation and come and get us before then. That doesn't mean that things like this can't happen right now, that we can't go through some very uncomfortable and very disturbing times. So barring a miracle or the rapture, we're all going to go through this year. So what can you do? Make sure you do everything you can to take care of yourself, your family, your neighbors, the people around you. If everybody does that, we'll get through this easier together. So you need to be packing away a couple of extra cans of food whenever you go to the grocery store. Put that stuff aside. Food banks are already running short, so they could really use donations right now, but they're definitely going to need them a month, 2 months, 3 months down the road. So if you have the resources to be able to buy some of that food now when it's cheaper, because the price is going to go up as we go into the end of the year, go ahead and do that now, set that aside, and every week, every month, just go to your local food bank and donate those supplies, because your community is going to need you. So, is there any good news in this? Yes, I believe there is. Jesus said that one of the signs, one of the indications that his return is near is famine. And we're going to be seeing that soon, as we went over. So what that means is Jesus is coming soon. You combine this sign of famine with all the other signs that we've seen. The nation of Israel is back in the land. The Jewish people are back in control of Jerusalem. The gospel is being preached around the world. We're seeing the rise of a united Europe, the rise of the Gog of Magog alliance. We're seeing globalization. We're seeing all these things that Jesus and the prophets said to look for. And Jesus said, when you see all these signs converge, look up, your salvation draws near. So we can take hope and comfort knowing that Jesus is coming back soon. And when Jesus comes back, when he becomes the ruler over this world, we won't have to worry about famine anymore. There won't be any death or tears or crying. All of this is going to go away, and we're going to have paradise here on earth. So, guys, stay hopeful. Like and share this video. Let other people know about it. And God willing, we'll meet again. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.